Today I'm going to talk about process modeling, and especially the question of how can I make it more accessible to everybody in the organization, basically. So how can I lower the barriers to process modeling, something which is sometimes perceived as a little bit complicated. So a few words about the company. Signavio, we're a young company built in 2009. We're based out of Berlin. That's where we're headquartered. But we also have an office here in the US in Sunnyvale. So what are we doing? We have around 400 customers, large and small organizations. Why do they actually do process modeling? 40% of the cases, it's mainly driven by a process improvement initiative. Take an example of a car manufacturer, for example, who wants to improve how sales is done globally. That would be a typical example. Or you want to do certification like ISO or FDA or whatever compliance that you have to show, or other risk and compliance management scenarios. So a typical example would be here, for example, Wall Street banks get bashed a lot these days, and they invest heavily in risk and compliance systems. And the last portion we address, or that we're active in, is IT projects. So when you're implementing large ERP implementations or CRM or BPMS projects, you want to use process modeling basically for requirements engineering. You want to align business and IT, get to know what the business process looks like so that you know how to configure, customize these systems. One of the driving aspects for us as Signavio is ease of use and collaboration, which is the central points to make this whole topic applicable not only to an ivory tower within the organization of 4 or 5 people who are highly trained and can do process modeling, but really to leverage it and roll it out throughout the organization. So there's a lot of functionality you'll find about inviting colleagues or getting them involved, sharing information. It's a cloud service, so you don't have software installation. In most cases, it's as simply as passing on a link to get somebody involved. And something we also get a lot of inspiration from is, for example, these user engagement curves that you see in social networks that explain how people become involved in discussions. So from reading or following people to actively searching, to sharing information with colleagues, then starting to put in their own content with commenting or starring things, then really contributing, then driving initiatives, or in large initiatives, especially decentralized initiatives, then maybe also become part of a more governance group of people. So for getting people, up this curve, we do a lot on the different levels to really lower the barrier to contribute, engage people in that conversation. So how do we do that? So our picture is it's about 2 things. One is about inputting information into the system. So how do you actually create the process model or the process documentation? And the main question typically is how do you get to the first draft? So if you get people to provide a first draft of a process documentation, you've basically already won because people are working with the system. They start thinking in a more structured way. They don't do the process description purely in Word anymore, but in a more structured and controlled way. So here on this part, it's really about providing a smart modeling environment that allows you to input information in different ways. So of course, we started off with graphical modeling. I'm going to show that. We have a large crowd of people who say, well, I don't need that graphical modeling actually because I have Excel and I can describe all processes in Excel, or I have tables in my Word documents. That's why I'm going to show a mechanism to get these people who used to only use Excel spreadsheets for process modeling, how to move them more towards a BPMN world. And on the second half of the picture, it's about Well, actually, once you've put in information, you want to understand what you actually put in, what that means, if you properly reflected it, and then review, refine it on the way. There we see a lot of, we have a lot of focus on this collaboration and iteration over process models and process documentation. Things like simulation step through to understand the process better, and to have more of a quality control of this on these process models with style and conventions enforcement. And that's what I'm going to show now, live in the system. Okay, so probably a couple of you have already seen the system. So what you can do, you can organize a repository of process models, and just by using a function which is called QuickModel, that's probably the easiest way of getting started with process documentation. This is exactly for this kind of people who love to work with Excel spreadsheets, who have typically a certain template, what they fill in about their process, and this is how they document. So for example, if we think about an order to delivery process, this would be a process, for example, that starts with order received, and that ends with product delivered. What you can then describe is basically a list of activities describing how do you get from start to end. So you could say, for example, you start with check order, then the next step is check order. The next step would be that you want to, check order. You want to get more infos in some cases. That's done by actually the sales people. And then you want to send or ship product, which is not done by sales, but rather a warehouse. And as you can see here already, so I was doing really modeling in an Excel-style way, but the system already gives you the BPMN presentation for that, so making it very easy for people to create the first draft of a graphical process model without actually needing to go down the graphical way. You can, of course, here do the full, you have the full concepts of BPMN available. So for example, having data inputs in the process. You all have it in this thing here. There's, of course, certain limits to it. So if you now ask me, well, how do I specify parallelism? Or wait a minute, this get more infos is actually something that only happens in certain cases. So of course, this interface here is meant to be very simple because we know that people, well, we tested it out, how much can you do? And we figured that those people who actually then start thinking in terms of these more complex structures are better off with a graphical modeling tool pretty quickly. So we can switch and say we want to take this process model now, refine it further in a graphical way. Then we have here a graphical editor where you can, for example, add more lanes in there. You can do all the graphical editing that you like. For example, we introduce a decision point, and then go along with modeling the process. An interesting thing here, you see this small icon here, is that we experiment a lot with different alternative input modes into the system. So using the mouse and the keyboard is the standard way of process modeling, but we figure out there are other ways to do it. So for example, purchase items. There's also the possibility that you do voice input to the system, and it will do, well, translate it into text, and it eases in a lot of scenarios, for example, in a workshop, the way of process modeling. Then put items on stock. So it even understands certain semantics of the process model. So it added a sequence flow here and a subsequent activity. A couple of the commands that we have in process modeling, we translated to the speech-based input. And we're at the end. So it also distinguishes different, symbol types in BPMN in there. Okay, so once you've created a process model, as I said in the slide here, it's about sharing it with other people, inviting them to edit or simulating. I'm not going to show these two, but I'm going to focus a little bit more about this style and conventions enforcement. So now you can go ahead and say, well, I read, for example, Bruce Silver's book, and he has a lot of style rules that go beyond the BPMN standard. So here, according to BPMN standard, this is a pretty good diagram, right? So all the syntax is respected, all the activities are nicely assigned to one lane and not to multiple lanes, for example. So some basic rules we followed already. But according to Bruce's book, this would not be good enough as a diagram. So let the system tell us what do we have to improve to make this a good diagram. So here we have certain modeling conventions or style guides configured that you can use to check this diagram. So for example, the rules that come from Bruce's book, they would mainly complain in this case about missing labels, right? So there are a lot of other rules. So for example, deadlocks, there should be no deadlocks, or there should be, for example, if you do exception handling, there should be a certain consistency in these models, and then the tool would tell you what you have to do. In terms of modeling conventions or style guides, as I said, we have multiple pre-configured, but you could also configure them yourself. So here's something where we basically collected. We looked at a lot of modeling conventions documents from a whole range of customers, and we identified what are the typical rules or the typical things that are in these modeling conventions documents, and we checked what are the things that can be checked automatically, and what are the things that have to be run by a manual checker. So there are, for example, things that go in the direction of use of notation, for example, or naming conventions, or regarding the process structures, certain requirements there, or what else do we have? Layouting rules. So all of these things are rules that go beyond the BPMN standard. And we see, for example, government initiatives. Here in the United States, it would be, for example, DODAF from the Department of Defense, who have a style guide for how BPMN diagrams should look like. Or in Switzerland, there's something, or in many other countries, or industry initiatives that come up with these with additional style guides. And I think at the moment we have around 5 or 6 pre-configured ones. And then you can go ahead and define your own conventions and say which are the rules that are of interest to you. Okay, good. So now I'm going to show you one more thing. Last Thursday, I went to my engineers and said, look, next week I'm going to this very, very exciting event in California, and they don't want to see the standard stuff, not the stuff that is in the product that you can buy, but something that goes more into the future and is really cool. Is there something you have? I mean, the speech-based thing is still not in the product yet because we have to figure out a couple of things still. For example, when I do the testing, if I say purchase items, about 40% of the times it says purchased items. So from a grammar form, doesn't match an activity description. So with grammar analysis and the knowledge of the process structure, you can improve a lot what the system does for you. And the same guy who did the speech recognition, he told me, well, I have something. I went to a trade show, and people gave me this cool device. It's this one. And I can do crazy stuff with it. And I said, show me the crazy stuff. And so let me try if it works. So it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't work. But let's see. So I'll switch it on. What it does is basically it gives you the Minority Report version of process modeling. right? So it's a device that identifies your fingers up in the air with like 3D cameras or something in there. And we made a little bit of experiment. So it's not more than an experiment here. How we could use that for process modeling. So of course you could move and select things. So in this case, just by holding over a shape for a little bit longer of time. That's one thing. And then the next thing is about gestures. So these systems are able to identify if you do this move, or if you do draw a circle, or we, for example, tried, oops, now it's detecting my head. So we tried a whole lot of things and thought about what kind of gestures could be good to have a real minority report experience or process modeling. So for example, we had the punch move to delete things, but it recognized the punch far too often, so most of the time all your model got deleted. And the problem was the engineer, he optimized the whole gesture thing towards his hands, and he has like really huge hands. And that's why it let me see if it works. So for example, if oh, wait a second, yeah. So there's well, it doesn't, come on. Well, as I said, come on. Don't let me hang in here. Yesterday it worked. Okay. Let me tell you what it's supposed to do. Come on. No, won't let me. Well, the gesture recognition is like a really tough part. Now he did magically what I wanted to do, but in a different part of the diagram, so I'm sorry for that. So, so what it was supposed to do is, if you make the diagram look nice, you want to, care about the spacing and everything. So we tried out moves like, you can do like this and this, but detecting two hands still has a little bit struggling. So that was the easy version of it. So it's more of an experiment, right? So you can see it's not going to end up in the product real soon, but what I wanted to show you is something real cool. Okay, good. So I'm happy to get your input on these kinds of things, whether that's stupid toy stuff or whether it has some relevance out there. Okay, so that's already about it from my side. Of course, I'm also happy to discuss with you a really cool and new project that we got involved in. So we invested in this company, Effective, which is a new cloud service built by Tom Bayens. So the inventor of JBPM activity has a new company. Yeah, we finally also move into the execution or automation space. So, but that's probably rather more for the B or the breaks to discuss what we're up to there. Okay, thank you.